Yeah, very. I mean, it's very interesting. And funny enough, before we done this interview, I went to a cafe
Mm-hmm.
recently because we talked about people upping their game and so on and so forth. And then I went to do some shopping. And what was interesting was the customer service was almost mechanical. Hi, sir. How are you, sir? Can you help, sir? I've been to restaurants where that's happened. Hi, sir. What do you want, sir? And so on and so forth. Do you think, and especially in an age of political correctness where people are almost afraid to say what they want, so almost what they say is almost a lot more predictable than say it was 20 years ago. Do you think one of the problems is now we've almost become manufactured ourselves because of
Exactly.
correctness, because of the way the culture's changed, because of customer service, etc., and therefore you've got this AI human or voice that isn't too dissimilar from like what we do in everyday life now?
Mm. You're absolutely correct. Look, it's an old problem that humans are made to act like machines. The other thing that happened in 1936 when Turing was writing that paper is that Charlie Chaplin brought out his film Modern Times, which is about getting, people being in factories effectively feeling like and being treated like cogs in a machine. So it's always been, in the history of like industrial society is a history of people being treated like their machines until eventually you can replace them altogether with machines. And that's a problem. We know that's a problem. The interesting thing about this generative AI recently is it's extending that problem to the way we talk and the way we think, not just to things we might do with our hands or solving rote problems like the ones Turing was thinking about. And that's a problem. If the way we communicate with each other and use words can be automated that easily, we're not using words well enough.
Yeah.
And we're all doing it. Each time we use, autocomplete on a text or an email, also now you get these suggestions on emails saying, okay, great, thanks, have a nice day. Each time you do that, it's like you're putting yourself out of business in a way.
Yeah,
You're letting the machine take over. And yeah, what you say about customer service, anything where it would be nice to talk to a human, it's almost like this generative AI is showing us what we were in danger of becoming. Previously, we were treating each other like machines or happy to talk like machines. Now it's like, bloody hell, we might actually be talking to a machine, literally. It's sort of, I think it's scaring us into thinking again.
Yeah, it's almost like people now reading from a script.
Indeed.
What the script is going to say beforehand. And so that's my worry is even before AI, we were kind of turning these automatons where if you said something, you're afraid of saying something, so therefore you'd say a predictable answer and so on and so forth. And then AI's come along and it's kind of, like I say, making us think about, oh, it's wrong because what they're doing is wrong because it's not from human being. We're kind of doing it ourselves.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. So the AI is sort of reminding us of that and throwing the ball back into our court, really. It's not that, if the gap between us and our machines seems to be closing, sure, that might be because the machines are getting better, but it could also be because we're getting worse.
Yeah.
I think people aren't necessarily willing to confront that possibility.
I think the cynic in me would say we're getting worse, more of a latter, absolutely. Right at the beginning, you talked about the charity you worked for and genetics as well. So how is AI being used in that field?
Well, the interesting thing about genetics, this year is the 70th anniversary of the double helix structure of DNA being discovered. And DNA is, in a way, it is digital already. It's nature breaking things down into units and packets of things that can be understood in terms of data. So in that sense, it's, information technology, AI or otherwise, is very well suited to thinking about genetics. And that's why there's a whole field called bioinformatics, which is about using computers to understand genes and genomes better. So obviously AI is now adding to that, the sophistication of the way we can interrogate genomic data. AI is also, generative AI even, is also helping us come up with ideas for new synthetic molecules that we can use when we're trying to find ways of changing or doing things to genomes. So that's all an extremely rich field. My one caution, I suppose, is that not everything coming out of it is sensible. Like with any field, there'll be snake oil, there'll be people pushing things that aren't really, you know, what they claim to be, or aren't as good at doing what they claim they are. And in genomics, there's a field, there's a type of genomic data which is very different from traditional genomic data, which is called polygenic scores, which has become possible recently, which people are often claiming too much for. So when you see things being discussed and it involves polygenic scores, my advice is be wary. There are some legitimate uses for those, but they are not the same as traditional genetic tests. And then people make claims for them that might not be borne out.
Does AI, and you talked about genetic tests, does AI, could it become more predictive in the future? And what I mean by that is, you heard this thing where you take a blood test and it can decide whether you're more susceptible to various illnesses or conditions in the future. Could AI develop or be used itself as a way of predicting, making things more predictive in terms of you're more likely to catch this or have this develop in the future? And if so, is there a case of, especially if it's from birth and almost a baby, it almost can be a kind of a form of eugenics, like, i.e. if you catch it soon enough that someone might say, oh, I don't want my child being like that, or am I being too skeptical?
You've thrown several different things in the pot there. I'm going to have to separate them out a bit.
Yeah.
So could AI help us look at genomic data and predict things about the future? Yes, it could, but a lot of the time when that claim is being made at the moment, it's using the idea of polygenic scores, which, to illustrate how abstract polygenic scores are, you could make one for any human characteristic whatsoever, regardless of whether it's proven to have a genetic component or not, because it doesn't care. It's a way of taking a vast quantity of data and using it to create some sort of likelihood of something, and it doesn't actually care whether a mechanism has been found to explain whether that's the case or not. So it's happening in quite an abstract field, and it can be very useful, but people are assuming just because it gives you an answer that the answer must be true, and that's not the case with polygenic scores.